This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
A really fun slate of games on tap for Week 7 in the NFL, and with that comes a lot of fun player props as well. We got things popping last night with a surprisingly fun game between the Steelers and Bengals. So we're going to try to keep it rolling by talking about some props for Week 7 with Aidan Cotter of FanDuel Research, picking his brain on his favorite bets for this week at FanDuel Sportsbook. Welcome on into Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast. My name is JimSannes. I am a managing editor for FanDuel Research, joined here as mentioned by Aidan Cotter. Check him out on X at AidanCotterFD. He is on Blue Sky at Aidan Cotter. Check out his work at FanDuel Research, where he is a writer for us. Aidan, it is Week 7. A lot of fun matchups on tap for this week. How you doing today?
Pretty great, Jim. I got to watch my guy Joe Flacco just throw it back to at least 2023 last night. That was really fun. It was hard to tell if it was like the offenses were kind of cooking or the defenses were just that bad because, man, both teams had some blown coverages, but yeah, it was fun and it was a good way to start off hopefully a high-scoring week.
Kind of a bummer that you are on the road this week because we don't get the Flacco jersey, but hey, still a fun background. So I think that's a decent consolation for not having the Flacco. Can we call it like a shrine? Is that aggressive?
I think so. Yeah. A Browns Flacco jersey is that would be a shrine.
That counts as a shrine. Anything that is Browns Flacco paraphernalia that was bought before this round with the Browns, which is already over, I think that counts as a shrine for sure. Today, we're going to talk to Aidan about some player props for Week 7. We're going to dig into how much matchups matter because there are some fun running backs in polar opposite situations. Cam Scadaboo in Denver. We've got Quinshawn Judkins taking on the Dolphins in Gale Force wins. Are books overplaying the value of matchups there? That's what I want to dig into Aidan with there. Then we'll talk about some situations that could be in flux for some value in the prop market. Then we'll dig into Aidan's favorite player props, touchdown bets, and a same game parlay he likes at FanDuel Sportsbook. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread and the FanDuel Football Betting YouTube page. We're here Monday through Friday during NFL and college football season. Of course, the college football show already posted with Ken Padgett. We talked about NFL Week 7 with Liv Moods, got her read on spreads and totals for the big games this weekend on yesterday's show. Of course, the DFS show also on this same feed on the YouTube side of things. FanDuel Football Betting YouTube page. Subscribe there. Leave us a thumbs up and turn on notifications to get those shows as they go live Monday through Friday. And of course, Covering the Spread podcast feed for all the betting shows, same place, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, 5-star rating over there. We appreciate everyone tuning in as always. FanDuel's getting you ready for kickoff with an offer you won't want to miss. New customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet $5, and if it wins, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. You can build parlays, bet player props, ride the live lines, whatever your style, FanDuel has you covered. NFL season is finally here. Only question is, are you ready to play? Must be 21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in DC, Kentucky, or Wyoming. First online, real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued is now withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Now, Aidan, let's begin things with that matchup discussion because, as mentioned, some players in very extreme matchups this week. Guys, we talked about a lot here on the show, the prop show throughout this year. And I wanted to ask you, to what extent do you consider matchups when betting props versus things such as usage? I consider wind. There are a lot of things to consider. Where do matchups settle in that sliding scale for you?
Yeah, I think this is something that has been kind of a work in progress for me, coming as someone who is more like fantasy oriented, who would play a lot of DFS and a lot of season long leagues, trying to apply that to these prop bets. I mean, matchups are obviously important, but again, like that is baked into the number that you're getting. So like Quinshot Judkins, for example, in a really soft matchup, his rushing yard over under is like 90 versus
It's been increasing throughout the week.
right. And versus, like you said, like Scadabo, whose rushing plus receiving prop is only 79.5. And like, yes, like they've both been getting really good usage. And obviously Judkins is in a much better matchup. But like, I think it really is just much more of a case by case basis and having to apply it because you're not shooting for upside. If you're taking over 79.5 Cam Scadabo rush plus receiving yards, if he goes for 80 on the dot, that is the exact same for us as if he goes for 100, right? So it really, I think, matters a little bit less just because that's already going to be baked into the lines. And we're also still just not dealing with huge sample sizes yet. I mean, we know dating back the last few seasons, the Broncos have a great defense and the Dolphins have a pretty stinky defense. But I just think it is something that we might look at a little too much versus like those volume based metrics that are going to be more consistent and more telling of like how much is this player actually getting the ball. And does it really matter as much if they're playing like a great defense? And like we want to be aware of like the extremes and like the polars, like you said, like both of those are really good examples for that. But other than that, I think it really is just more of a case by case basis because it's baked into the lines.
I think the tough part is you mentioned that the opposite ends are where it matters most, but that's also where we see the most movement in the market. And like that's the issue that we have is like once the betting public knows that you can run at will on the Dolphins, you're not going to see a lot of value in the prop market against them because people will just kind of bet that, without thinking about it too much. What I want to do personally is find the matchups that maybe are a bit underrated, or maybe a bit like find the spots that maybe the public hasn't identified yet necessarily. So a couple weeks ago for me, that was buying into players facing the Colts because that defense hadn't faced a lot of like really great offenses yet. And I thought there might be due for some regression, trying to find those spots that, or, if you had bought into fading teams facing the Falcons before that game against the Bills, trying to identify the spots where we haven't gotten like into the meme zone effectively, where it's like, oh, just, take all the overs against the Dolphins, take all the unders against the Broncos. It's not that easy. I do think there is value in Jackson Dart's rushing under this week because of the Broncos, but that's a different discussion. But like, it's finding those spots that haven't become the memes yet. The well-known matchups. That to me is where you can actually find some value based on matchups.
Yeah, too. And like just because a team does have a good pass defense overall, that doesn't necessarily mean that like they're going to be great against every area of the field or like every specific position. So it is just like you have to dig in and get a little more context than just applying that blanketly to the entire unit.
Context always matters. Let's talk about some additional context that may matter and talk through some evolving situations. This is always a spot we can look to try to find some potential value in the prop market. Now, with these situations, we won't always see props posted as of yet because we're recording this Friday morning. So that's something to keep in mind. But what are the situations you're keeping an eye on, Aidan, for week 7, whether props are up or not?
I mean, I feel like right off the bat, this Panthers running back room, like, I'm just fascinated to see what happens here. And like, obviously after what Rico has done the last 2 games, like he's not going to go away. But at the same time, the Panthers just paid Chuba Hubbard and he has played well. I think they're both top 10 in rushing success rate this year. And so I don't really see a situation where both of them are phased out or like one of them is really like coming out ahead. And that's also something like if Chuba plays this week, I would assume his number is going to be a little bit lower, probably considerably lower than Rico's. And I think that's probably a spot where we can buy into Chuba just because we know he's going to get the ball. And so those kind of situations are really what I'm interested in seeing when the props do drop. I think another big one is, and I think you can almost say this every week for the last few years, is the 49ers receivers. Like, what's going on here? Like, and this is, again, something we're probably not going to know, maybe not even until Sunday afternoon, about what receivers are playing or who's going to be active, who's even going to be under center.
Yeah.
But that's the sort of thing where, like, if we're getting George Kittle without Ricky Pearsall, without Juwan Jennings, like, that's going to be something where I know he's missed aside from that first quarter, the first 6 games, but man, his props are going to be something I'm really interested in. So it's just monitoring these evolving situations and these injuries throughout the week, even going into Sunday, is, I think, just super important.
I think our lone blessing with the Niners is that Kittle is on IR and it's a Sunday game, which means that they want to play him, they have to activate him on Saturday. I hate island games because they allow the teams to activate guys from IR at like 4:00 in the afternoon, and we don't get that information until then. Versus the Sunday slate, like it's a Monday game. You can activate a dude on Sunday. It's fine. But like for a Monday or like a Sunday game, they got to activate them on Saturday. And we get that information early, which allows us to kind of digest the lines, and allows sportsbooks to set those lines, us to digest them and react. But Kittle, like you said, could be in a pretty good situation. And it's just, that is a total mess. So them and the Bucks, just a nightmare. As I'm trying to like build out anytime touchdown projections, they're making my life pretty hellish, which is a true delight. And not super surprising based on history with them. All right, Aidan, let's dig into some thoughts where props are posted for Sunday. When you look at the board, let's start with the usage and yardage props. Where are you seeing value there for this week?
Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, let's go to this Chiefs-Raiders game, and Rashee Rice is back. First game since week 4 of last season, played very sparingly. So really just we haven't seen him in full force since week 3 of last year. And I know, look at that. Okay, so when I wrote these numbers down, these lines dropped this morning, and his receiving yards prop was at 60.5, and it's now up to 65.5. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if that keeps growing. I do still think we're getting a pretty good number here at the over of 65.5 receiving yards. If we look at the last 13 games that he has played with Mahomes, so the 3 games from last year, 3 full games, and then from week 12 through the Super Bowl of 2023, Rashee Rice was averaging 7.5 receptions at 82.2 yards per game. He had a 28% target share and was targeted on nearly 30% of his routes, which is like really that like elite benchmark that we're looking for. He had hit at least 70 receiving yards in 8 of those 13 games, and he had hit at least 75 receiving yards in all 3 from last season. And I don't think we can like just blanketly put that target share and that workload that he was getting last season into this team. It is really a different context. We've seen Xavier Worthy come on really strong. Hollywood Brown is now in the mix, and like they do kind of have some capable guys, and we've seen that with how well Mahomes has been playing this year. Like it's clear that this is a different receiving core than last year. That being said, I think what really sells this for me, and where I'm pretty confident where Rice can jump right back in here, is like him and Kelsey kind of play a pretty similar role over that like middle of the field. And we saw that last year when Rice was healthy. Kelsey was like, looked like he was kind of dust. And then like, it was like, as soon as Rice got hurt, it was like, okay, we're going right back to Travis Kelsey. And so Kelsey's been getting pretty good work to start the season. And he's looked good. And I think he's looked a lot better than last year. That being said, like, I would be surprised if he continues to see that big of a target share when Rice is back and he's taking those short yardage looks. And especially in like the yards market, we know how much of a threat he is.
Yeah.
Once he catches the ball after the catch, like, and this Raiders defense is just not one we should be super afraid of. Like, I think the Chiefs should really cook here. The Raiders have really struggled to defend wide receivers. They've given up the 7th most yards per route run, the 4th highest target share to the position. And they've been pretty good against the run. Even like when you adjust for schedule, they're top 10 in adjusted run defense, but then 21st in adjusted pass defense. And they've been thrown on at the 9th highest rate in the NFL. And you look at a team like Kansas City, like the only thing that really does scare me here is like they're double-digit favorites at home. But they've been the most pass-heavy team in the NFL. They lead the league in pass rate over expectations by a pretty significant margin. They're top 10 in raw pass rate, and they have the 5th highest pass rate when leading, which I think is really important because I think the last couple of years, like there's just something about Mahomes this year that just seems a little different. Like he's just kind of tired of the disrespect almost that he's gotten the last few years with these like poor pass catchers, and finally have everyone healthy this week. I do think they're going to get Rashee Rice involved like right off the bat and get him going. And so I think this is a good number. I had written down even 70.5 as like an alt market. I wouldn't be surprised if it settled a little closer to that number than where it's at right now. But I do still think that's a pretty nice value, just given how involved and how featured he was in the past.
Yeah, that number right now, as you mentioned, 65.5. Over for him is sitting at -114. Do you want to take a look here at the alt markets quickly for Rashee Rice? 70 plus receiving yards is +104. 80 plus is +154. And I agree with you. Like, The two concerns with Rice are it's not just a suspension, but also torn ACL. But it's important to remember he played in the preseason, which is A, absurd. But B, like that tells me that knee is healthy, very, very healthy. And that's a good thing here. Did want to ask you though, because like I agree with the Rashee Rice thought process, and I think that's a good number to get him at. I was also kind of surprised that Xavier Worthy wasn't higher. 41.5 feels low. Not gonna lie, did bet this one on the exercise bike this morning. I did take Xavier Worthy over just because I feel like we maybe have phased him out a bit too quickly. Full in practice on Wednesday and Thursday with those ankle and shoulder injuries. I don't hate the idea of buying into Worthy as well, despite the fact that Rice will hog a lot of targets.
No, absolutely. I'm on the same page. I was really looking at both of these. I mean, even like Hollywood at 23.5, like I think this is just going to be a situation where Rashee Rice, he is going to take up a larger target share and he's going to take targets away from guys, but he's also going to open up areas of the field for other people where like they haven't had a threat like this since he went down. And like Xavier Worthy is awesome, but I don't think he's built for that same like short yardage role. Like, I would not be surprised if like this really just opens up the entire Chiefs passing game and we're going to get value in some of these other receivers just because of all the attention that Rice is going to draw. So yeah, I'm on the same page with you there.
And Rice has drawn targets from Tyquan Thornton, from Juju Smith-Schuster, not necessarily from Xavier Worthy. So I agree with that. Right. So actually went back down to 64.5. So there we go. A little bit of movement to make that a little bit nicer there. Over 64.5 for Rashee Rice is -114. Let's talk some touchdowns, Aidan. Where are you seeing value in the touchdown market for week number 7?
Yeah, this is another spot where like I want to be continuing to monitor and see these lines as they come out. Like the real big game environment this week is Commanders Cowboys. We don't really have any odds up for that quite yet. And so that's definitely somewhere I want to be looking into with how high that total is. But just for what's up right now, let's go to this Patriots Titans game where Pats are on the road, which is like, not great. But we saw Drake May has just been playing like an MVP candidate, and they have really not struggled to move the ball at all this year. And you get Ramondre Stevenson at +105. Like Ramondre is not one of my favorite players in the NFL. I was a big Travion Henderson bro. Like really thought that he was going to come in and take this backfield right away. That just hasn't happened. Like it doesn't seem to matter how much Ramondre fumbles or like he has actually looked, I think, better than he did last year. It seems like he's healthier this year, and they have not been afraid to give him the rock. Like for the season, he leads their running backs in red zone snap rate. He's averaging almost 2 red zone rush attempts per game, and no other running back on their team is over 1. And especially now that Antonio Gibson is out, like over the last 2 games, we've seen Ramondre average 2.5 red zone rush attempts per game. He's just someone who they seem to trust regardless. And I think this is more so just a bet on like, I trust the Patriots right now to move the ball efficiently against the Titans, and they're going to be able to put up points in this spot. And just knowing that like he has been their go-to back once they get inside the 20, even it doesn't really matter. We don't really have to worry much about their trust going away here. Just with like, how many times does he have to fumble before they bench him? I don't think there's really a number at this point. And he's been so heavily involved, and the Patriots have been such an efficient offense of late that I do think getting this at plus odds is a pretty intriguing, especially relative to some of the other teams who have similar implied totals on the slate. Like you're not getting plus odds with running backs on the like Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt is not going to be at +105. Like we're not seeing the same odds for teams with similar implied totals. And even at +105, like I think this is a pretty good number for Ramondre.
So I made a joke on Twitter after Ramondre fumbled in that Sunday night game. I was like, oh, they're going to bench him for the rest of this game and I'll have a 70% snap rate next week. His snap rate the week after was 70.7%. They always go back to Ramondre. And now there's no Antonio Gibson, which kind of, I think, solidifies that snap rate a bit. Eventually, we will see Henderson, I think, eat into that more, but hasn't happened yet. When they get him on the field, they're giving Henderson the ball, and when that does matter. But like, Ramondre's still out there. They're going to put up some points here against Tennessee. There's some wind concerns there, which could hurt the scoring environment a bit. But like, I don't think that's a bad number. And like his role is going to stick. So +105, I think does make sense for Ramondre here.
Yeah. And like, even if, again, we're going to, like you said, we're going to start to see Travion involved more. Like you don't use that high draft capital to not use that running back. But even in college, like he played with Judkins and like he wasn't necessarily that bruising back, and not that Ramondre is, but we have seen in his time in New England, like they have trusted him a lot around the goal line. And I think in this spot where we do expect them to put up some points, I do like this number at plus 105.
All right. So that's Ramondre at plus 105. Any other touchdown props stand out to you this week, Aidan?
Yeah. And I just want to shout out more of a fun one here. Let's go to this Vikings Eagles game. Jalen Naylor, who is like their wide receiver 3, is plus 600 to score against the Eagles. And like, that just feels awfully high for someone who has continuously had such a strong role for them as their third wide receiver. Even if we just look at the 2 games where Jordan Addison has played, he's been on the field for 12 out of their 18 red zone snaps. And for the season, he has been incredibly evolved and just kind of out there a lot. And I think what really interests me at this number is that Minnesota has the second highest red zone pass rate in the NFL this season. And when you look at just the Carson Wentz game, like that number shoots up close to 70% pass rate in the red zone, which is kind of bonkers, but like shouldn't really surprise us. And it's also like, I think we could look into like Justin Jefferson in this kind of a spot. And because I don't think the Vikings are going to have trouble moving the ball, even if it's Carson Wentz against his former team. But Jalen Naylor, like plus 600, he scored 2 weeks ago. He's seen multiple red zone targets, like in 2 of the last 3 games. Like you look at this kind of a profile is one that I do think we can buy into at these longer odds. Obviously not our same unit size that we're going to be placing on these straight bets, but I do think at plus 600, like this is a fun little sprinkle in a game where I do think the Vikings are going to score points. And we've seen Jalen Naylor, even since Jordan Addison has been out, he has been a factor in the red zone. And so just with how much they're throwing down there, this is definitely interesting for me.
I do not have a super high projection on Jalen Naylor in my touchdown odds. I still am at plus 550. Like I know that I'm not like getting out over my skis on like projecting Jalen Naylor to get a lot of work, given Thielen's there, Addison is there, stuff like that. It's still plus 550 for me. So like, it's just sometimes the number is a value, even if it may not be a guy who's super involved. And I think that Naylor does make sense there. So that's Jalen Naylor 6-1 at FanDuel Sportsbook for Eagles and Vikings. Okay, Aidan, I'm going to open up the board for you right now. I'm going to give you one same game parlay to place at FanDuel Sportsbook for week number 7. Which game are you going to, and which legs do you want to include in that SGP?
I think I want to go to an indoor game this week just with how much wind is going to be a factor across the league. And so looking at this Colts Chargers game in the 4 o'clock window, let's start with over 48.5. Just right off the bat, like the Colts have been the best offense in the NFL. They lead the league in scoring. They're first in our adjusted offense metric. But they're just 14th in adjusted defense. And like, I wouldn't be surprised if that continues to drop a little bit. They haven't really played the best offenses in the league to this point. But offensively, they've been awesome. They've scored at least 20 points in all 6 games this season. They scored 29 points in 5 out of the 6. But when you look at their opponents, like 4 out of the 6 they've played have scored 20 points against them. And that includes Jacoby Brissett's Cardinals last week. And I don't know about you, I personally think Justin Herbert might be a little bit better than Jacoby Brissett, especially at home. And we have seen the Chargers offense, like aside from last week, they had hit kind of a lull after a strong start to the season, but their defense has also not been super impressive. They've been good against the pass, but they're just 26th in adjusted run defense. They've given up 27 points in back-to-back games to the Commanders in Jaden Daniels' first game back from injury, and who clearly is not 100%. And then last week to the Dolphins, who like not a super impressive offense. Like they've been looking better, but I don't think this is really a defense that we should be afraid of. And I don't think the Colts are going to have trouble moving the ball. And this is a spot where I do expect more of a bounce back for the Chargers, especially getting Quentin Johnson back this week, who practiced in full yesterday. I think this is a nice spot to start this same game parlay, assuming we're going to get points. And if we're going to get points, and I do think this is going to be a closer game, I think we can throw in Daniel Jones over 17.5 rushing yards. Jones has at least 20 rushing yards in half of his games this season. And in games where he's scrambled one time, he's hit this in 3 out of 4. And you look at the Chargers have given up the most quarterback scrambles, the 3rd most rush attempts to quarterbacks, and the 2nd most just total rushing yards to opposing quarterbacks. 5 out of the 6 quarterbacks they faced have gone over this mark. And the only one who didn't was Tua, who has a season high of like 10 rushing yards this season. And I think probably most importantly for me is The Chargers are just 20th in pressure rate, which I do think is kind of important for a guy like Jones, who is going to sit in the pocket. But like, also, we have seen he's not afraid to get out and run. And we know Shane Steichen can get creative and can draw up some design runs for him. And so I think if we're assuming this is going to be more of a back and forth game, throwing in his rushing yards is pretty interesting. And then to round it out, going into the touchdown market, I just think Keenan Allen, I think you could bet this straight too. I think Keenan Allen is still a value here. I was really out on Keenan as a Bears fan. I was.
Can't imagine why.
Yeah. Last season, it did not look good, but I mean, he's obviously not the same player he was, but he's plus 210 to score this week. I just think for someone who leads his team in red zone target rate, he leads his team in end zone target rate, and that's including in just the games with Quentin Johnson active. He's seen at least 7 targets in all 6 games this season. He's seen an end zone target in 5 out of the 6 games, and he's seen multiple red zone targets in half of the games this season. Like, again, this is more of just like a game theory where I'm expecting the Chargers to score. I don't really trust their running backs, and I'm not sure if they do either. I mean, we saw Kamani Vidal had a really nice game against the Dolphins, but we also just talked about how bad the Dolphins are against the run. I wouldn't be surprised if we see the Chargers have to throw to keep up with this Colts offense. And when they get in close, he trusts Keenan Allen. We've seen that throughout the years, and that's picked up right where it left off, even with Ladd and Quentin both playing well of late. Like, it's still Keenan Allen in those short yard situations, in those areas where he trusts, where he needs like a secure catch. We know Keenan Allen's going to be there. And for having the longest odds out of their top 3 receivers, I think that's a pretty interesting way to round out the same game parlay.
We talked before about the agreement on Jalen Naylor. Keenan Allen, 2-1 for me to score. And he's plus 210 at FanDuel Sportsbook. So a value on that one as well. Over 48.5 with Daniel Jones, over 17.5 rushing yards. Keenan Allen to score, plus 664 at FanDuel Sportsbook. So again, I agree with the Allen leg, obviously. But then also Daniel Jones, like you said, the Chargers, once you adjust for opponent, have also let up a lot of explosive runs to quarterbacks. They rank 3rd in schedule adjusted explosive runs per game allowed to opposing quarterbacks. Jones can do that. He's very athletic. And if they do fall behind in this game via maybe a Keenan Allen touchdown, hypothetically, that could lead to more rush attempts for Jones too. So I think that this does make sense at plus 664. And I like the process here.
Yeah. I just think this is going to be a game, supposed to be one of the more high scoring games on the slate. And if we do get some back and forth action, I really like the way that these legs correlate with the over.
Alrighty, again, that is over 48.5. Daniel Jones over 17.5 rushing yards, and Keenan Allen to score plus 664 at FanDuel Sportsbook. That is all that we have here for today and this week on Covering the Spread. Back with you once again Monday for another Monday Night Football doubleheader for actually 2 games I like. I know there's more interest in the Lions and the Buccaneers, but I kind of like Seahawks and Texans too, personally, because Aidan's number 1 most hated quarterback, CJ Stroud, is going to light up the Seahawks defense in that game to hit the over. But we'll talk about that game on Monday here on the show. To get that and all of our other shows as they're posted, subscribe to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts, but also the FanDuel Football Betting YouTube page. Aidan, appreciate the time as always. Good luck to you in week number 7. We'll talk to you once again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jim.
Find Aidan on X at AidanCotterFD. He is on Blue Sky at Aidan Cotter. I am on X and Blue Sky at JimSannes, Threads at Jim.Sannes, and you can find FanDuel Research on X at FanDuel Research. Big thank you to our YouTube producer, Justin Lane, for his work on the video side of things. Thank you, Justin, as always, and thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you with your bets across NFL Week 7 and College Football Week 8. We'll talk to you once again Monday to break down that Monday night doubleheader. This has been Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast.